Let us start with the example x plus 4 over x minus 3 less than 2. The way we're going to solve this problem is by bringing the 2 over to the left side, and then we want to get a common denominator. So we're going to multiply the 2 by x minus 3 over x minus 3. So the x plus 4 over x minus 3 minus, now here the 2 has to distribute out to the x and the negative 3. We're going to leave the minus sign here alone. So it's going to be 2 times x and then 2 times negative 3, which will give us negative 6 over x minus 3. So you can kind of think of this as this negative distributing out. So this negative here distributing to the 2x and the negative 6. And that's going to be less than 0. So I can get this under a common denominator of x minus 3. And it's going to be x minus 2x, which is just negative x, and 4 minus negative 6. And that's plus 10, less than 0. I'm going to set the top and the bottom equal to 0. So it's negative x plus 10 equals 0. X minus 3 equals 0. That will give us x equals 10 and x equals 3. So these are going to be the numbers we put on the number line. It's going to be 3 and 10. So the idea is I'm going to pick numbers to the left of 3, between 3 and 10, and right of 10. So a good number to pick for being less than 3 is 0. Plug it in. I get 0 plus 10 over 0 minus 3 will give me negative 10 over 3. So that's negative. The number between 3 and 10 is 5. So plug it in. I get negative 5 plus 10 over 5 minus 3, which is 5 halves, and that's positive. And finally, I can pick a number to the right of 10, say 15. Plug it in, I get negative 15 plus 10 over 15 minus 3, and that is negative 5 over 12, and that's negative. The problem is asking when it's less than 0, so that's going to be less than 0 in this interval, so x less than 3, and then x greater than 10. We have to be very careful not to include 3 and 10, because 3 will give us, well, 3 will make us divide by 0, because this thing would be 0 if you plug in 3, and then a 10 will make the whole inequality 0. So the whole fraction just turn into 0, which is not less than 0, so we ignore that. So our final answer is x less than 3 or x greater than 10. So this problem was tricky because we had to be very careful with how we distribute out the negative in the fraction here. So the common mistake for students to make is to say, well, this would have been x plus 4 over x minus 3, and then they would have said, oh, it's negative 2x minus 6 over x minus 3. And we know that's wrong. So just be careful of that. Okay. Let's move on to a different one. We have x over x plus 5 less than 1. Let's bring the 1 over to the left to get x over x plus 5 minus 1 less than 0. I'm going to multiply the 1 by x plus 5 over x plus 5, since that is the common denominator. I get x over x plus 5 minus, now I'm going to keep the minus outside, so I'm just going to focus on the 1 distributing out to the x and the x plus 5. 1 times x is x, 1 times 5 is 5. over x plus 5 less than 0. I can get these under a common denominator of x plus 5. And now this negative, this minus sign here, is going to distribute out to both pieces. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to say x minus x is 0. And then this negative has to distribute out to the 5 to give us negative 5 less than 0. The top is never equal to 0, so we're only going to look at the bottom being 0. And that is when x is negative 5. So let's draw a number line and put a negative 5 on there. We don't want to include negative 5 because that would make this denominator here equal to 0. We don't want that. So let's pick a number left of negative 5, let's say negative 10. Plug it in. I have negative 5 over negative 10 plus 5. And that will be just negative 5 over negative 5, which is positive 1. So this thing will be positive. Let's pick a number to the right of negative 5. Let's say 0. I have negative 5 over 0 plus 5. And that will just be a negative 1, which will be negative. In this problem, I'm looking when my answer is less than 0. So strictly less than 0, which will just be x greater than negative 5. So that will be over here. So that's my final answer. Let's move on to a more complicated problem. I have x minus 7 over x plus 3 greater than 2. I'm going to bring the 2 over to the left side. And then I'm going to get a common denominator. So the common denominator here is going to be x plus 3. So x minus 7 over x plus 3. And then this minus sign, I'm just going to keep it out here. I'm going to ignore it for now. I'm going to do 2 times x. That's 2x. And then 2 times 3 is 6. So that's positive 6 over x plus 3 greater than 0. They both have a common denominator of x plus 3, so I'm just going to put it over x plus 3. I'm going to do x minus 2x to give me negative x. Negative 7 minus 6 to get negative 13. Put that greater than 0. I'm going to set the top and the bottom both equal to 0. So let's see. Negative x minus 13 is 0. That's when x is negative 13. And then x here is negative 3. So I'm going to plot those points on the number line. And I'm going to start testing the different regions. So I'm going to pick a point less than negative 13. Let's say negative 20. Plug it in. So we have negative 20 minus 13 over negative 20 plus 3. These two negatives are going to make it a positive. So 20 minus 13 is 7 over negative 17. And that is negative. I'm going to plug in a number between negative 13 and negative 3. Let's say negative 5. I get negative 5 minus 13 over negative 5 plus 3. These two negatives are going to give me a positive. I have 5 minus 13 is negative, not negative 12, negative 8 over negative 2. And that's just negative, or that's just positive 4. So this is positive. Then I'm going to plug in a number greater than negative 3. Let's say 0. I'll put it up here. 0 minus 13 over 0 plus 3 will give me negative 13 over 3. And that's negative. In this case, I'm looking for when my solution is strictly greater than 0. And that's going to be in this region over here. So that's going to be, let's scroll down, that's going to be when x is between negative 13 and negative 3. I should add that we can't plug in negative 3 because that would make this denominator equal to 0. And negative 13 will make the top equal to 0, so we also don't want to include that. So my final answer is x between negative 13 and negative 3.